Hello everybody, and welcome to a complete guide to all monsters on Monsoon difficulty. We'll cover everything from regular beetles to overloading clay dune striders with tips and strategies to defeat any and all threats the game will throw at you, which, when you're on Monsoon, will be quite plentiful. Remember that all the choices you'll make in a run come down to the context of what monsters are around, the stage you're on, how much money you have, etc, etc. And this info should not be taken as the end-all be-all of killing stuff. Think of it more as a general strategy guide. I'll separate the monsters by categories: regular, major, and boss mobs. Inside of those categories, I'll rank each monster by their difficulty to fight from lowest to highest, and then give an overview on how to approach them in combat. Finally, elite affixes such as blazing, overloading, and malachite, all that stuff will be mentioned on a case-by-case basis. It will make more sense once we get started. There are timestamps in the description below if you want to hit a specific section. Otherwise, let's begin with the regular enemies. Starting at the bottom of the regular mobs, we have the beetles. They are melee, stay entirely on the ground, and have no range capabilities whatsoever. They are the easiest mobs you will encounter in the game, and if you're struggling with an early teleporter event, try keeping these guys alive because they'll simply eat up the director's spawn credits and not allow other monsters to spawn in their place. Nothing else to say about these. Moving up a bit in difficulty here, I'm lumping regular Lemurians, vultures, jellyfish, and hermit crabs together. These guys are the grunts of Risk of Rain 2. They need a tiny bit of thought to take out, especially if you throw in an elite affix or two, but for the most part, they will be no real threat to your run. So long as you keep sprinting, kiting in a circle, and jumping, you will hear all of that a lot in this guide. You should avoid the majority of their attacks and deplete their health with ease. There isn't any real strategy you need to take these guys out, just point and shoot. In the next tier, we have regular imps. While they have no range capability, their melee attack, which bleeds you, combined with their crazy mobility, makes them quite a big threat if left unchecked. Kiting in a circle is always a good strategy, but with the imps, I found it best to run back and forth in a straight line, turning directions once they use their attack. Their blink is what will keep them on top of you, and if you run in a line, they'll just blink past you and miss their attack. Groups of imps can easily overwhelm you, and their hitbox is quite small, so especially if you're lacking on AoE, imps can be a major threat to any run. But the highest threat on the regular monsters are lesser wisps. They have a tiny hitbox, they fly, they spawn in huge numbers, and have a hit scan attack, meaning their projectiles have virtually no travel time at all. If a wisp lines up to shoot on you, it's probably gonna hit. Also, did I mention they fire an extremely rapid 3-round burst and not a single shot? Yeah, that means that a single wisp can easily bypass the entirety of your one-shot protection at any point in a run. The strategy with lesser wisps is to simply kill them first. Easy as that. Until I get to the point where my ukuleles, ATGs, will-o-the-wisps, and all that stuff are taking care of the regular mobs while I fight a boss, I will always prioritize killing lesser wisps before anything else, even the boss itself. They are just that dangerous. If you let them pile up, you won't have any room to maneuver and will easily get overrun. Kill the wisps first. To recap from the weakest to strongest regular monsters, we have beetles, then Lemurians, vultures, jellyfish, and crabs, imps, and then lesser wisps. Moving on now to what I call the major enemies. These are technically the same monster type as the ones we just covered, but since these all have higher HP and damage as well as other unique aspects, I'm gonna put them in their own section. Starting at the bottom, we have the bighorn bison. Bison are basically just bigger beetles. They are always on the ground and can only hit you with the melee ability, albeit it is more dangerous than the beetle's headbutt. Luckily, the bison will let out their war cry whenever they're beginning a charge at you, so just keep your ears open and you will have plenty of time to dodge it. I like to take care of blazing and overloading bison as soon as I see them, because if I do happen to make that tiny mistake and get hit, those elite affixes will probably spell the end of the run. Other than that, just kill the bison because they give you a bit more money than the other monsters. Next up, we have the beetle guards and greater wisps. Beetle guards have 2 attacks, 1 range and 1 melee. As long as you aren't literally standing still, the only time where their melee attack should land is when you get caught on terrain or another mob. So really the only threat is the ranged attack, which can easily be avoided by hiding in a circle. At any time you're fighting a beetle guard, you should not be running in a straight line. Always be strafing left and right and you should be fine. Greater wisps, despite being bigger, stronger, and tougher to kill than the lesser counterparts, are actually much less of a threat overall. This is because their only attack is clearly broadcasted and easy to avoid. Again, the name of the game is movement, so as long as you keep moving, you will avoid the vast majority of greater wisp damage. But beware that their attack consists of 2 hits, because they have 2 hands. So by putting yourself against a wall or directly below them, you are drastically increasing your odds of getting hit by both shots. Basically, when fighting greater wisps, run in circles and be conscious of the closest walls and terrain to avoid being shotgunned by both of its attacks. Other than that, similar to the bison, greater wisps are just big bags of money. Hold on to your butts, because in the final difficulty tier we have golems, elder lemurians, brass contraptions, and clay templars. Each of these guys are equally dangerous, but in their own way. So let's begin with the golems. Golems are like lesser wisps because their attacks are essentially hit scan, but luckily they only fire a single hit per shot. However, the later a run goes, the vastly higher damage this attack will do. Avoid a golem's hit at all costs, else you will use your one-shot protection at the very least. Their hitboxes are quite big, so if you're playing someone with a stun like Commando or Artificer, you can interrupt them in their long windup and finish them off before they can start another attack. However, if you don't have any CC, just keep kiting around. I know this is about the 50th time I've mentioned already, but that is really important. You should never stop moving, sprinting, strafing, and jumping in Risk of Rank 2 so long as there are enemies around. Also, like the greater wisps, golem's beams do damage in an area, so avoid walls and terrains at all costs when you see the red laser beam charging up. After the lesser wisps at the top, stone golems are the next on my priority list of things to kill first, due to the danger of getting smacked by a beam. Coming now to elder lemurians. Oh boy. Similar to beetle guards, elder lemurians have both a melee and ranged attack, and both are quite dangerous. However, the biggest threat to elder lemurians is not knowing when they're coming. Seriously, these guys have like Ninja Pro on or something, because you will rarely hear them sneak up on you and give you the nice old one shot with their fire breath. Your best bet is to stay in a wide open area, such as the middle section of Abyssal Depths, and keep them in view the entire time. Their ranged attack will be the only thing they can throw at you, and the travel time of the fireballs is very slow, especially when compared to something like lesser wisps and stone golems. So as long as you're paying attention, you should be able to step between the line of balls that are coming at you with no issue. Remember that list of what I had to kill first? Well, brass contraptions are also very high on that list. In fact, when I said golems are in second place after lesser wisps, I actually meant it's brass contraptions. If you're focused on other targets when contraptions spawn, you'll get smacked by a huge spiky ball and end up losing a majority of your HP. Once you hear the bell toll sound of the contraption spawning, you need to immediately find them. In most cases, I'll just take them out as soon as I find them as well. However, once you do find them, they are quite easy to deal with. Simply move around them in a clockwise manner. So to the left if you're facing them. They throw 3 balls per attack cycle, and if you keep strafing to the left, you are pretty much guaranteeing that all 3 attacks will miss. Don't ask me why, it's just how it works. Trust me, as soon as you try this strategy out, you will immediately see the results. Finally, last but not least, for the major enemies, we have clay templars. These guys are self-explanatory. They have a big minigun and shoot said minigun until you die. The problem is that they do just that, shoot until you die. It seems like no matter how far you are from them, the only way they will stop firing is if you get behind terrain to line of sight them. Otherwise, they will keep gatting you down no matter how much distance you put between yourself and the bullets. So either keep terrain close by or have some CC ready to interrupt their channeled fire, and you will take care of the Templars no problem. Do not fight them in the open, whatever you do, especially with more than one Templar around, because they are absurdly accurate. Recapping the threat list for the majors, we have a Bison at the bottom, Beetle Guards and Greater Wisps in mid-tier, and Golems, Elder Lemurians, Brass Contraptions, and Clay Templars as the biggest threats. We have arrived to the final enemy category, boss monsters. Remember that there is a lot of context that goes into a given combat scenario, and the tips I'm giving you need to be applied in such context. Risk of Rain 2 is not a vacuum where you can follow one singular rule and get by, especially not on Monsoon. Starting at the bottom, we have the Beetle Queens. The only threat of the Queens are their ranged acid spit attack, and similar to the Golems and Greater Wisps, is dodged by consistently moving and staying away from walls and other terrain. Queens can and will shotgun you if you stand still and or next to terrain or below them. So keep the high ground and enjoy your otherwise free boss fight. Avoid the little wasp looking beetles that she spits out, the ones that create the green circle around them, because if you are inside that area, you have reduced armor, deal less damage, and attack slower. Otherwise, rejoice whenever you see the Beetle Queen spawn, because you are in for the easiest boss fight you could have hoped for. In the next tier of bosses, we have Grove Tenders, Stone Titans, and Magma and or Overloading Worms. If you have a good amount of AoE effects, especially on kill ones, such as Will of the Wisps, the Grove Tenders are a joke of a fight. They will constantly spawn a ton of mini lesser wisps that will proc those effects on death, meaning you just kill 1 or 2 of the tiny wisps and watch the chain reaction take care of the boss. The Grove Tendy's only real threat is its chain attack, so big surprise coming up here. Keep kiting in a circle and don't stand still for any reason. Keeping your distance isn't as big a deal because the chains travel quite quickly and have a wider angle of impact the farther out you are from them, so I'd actually recommend to stay nice and close to them for that reason. Speaking of nice and close, we have Stone Titans. Now, if you only have a single Titan to fight, these guys are a complete joke, like the Grove Tenders. Literally stick right next to them, run in a circle, and they will never laser you. All the Titan's lasers, yes, even Aurelianite, are based off of proximity, so if you stay close, they will never use the laser attack, which is by far the biggest threat. Other than that, you'll have to time your jumps to avoid the shoulder-mounted laser rock thing that they activate, as well as the circular pillar attack they place on the ground. However, if you're as close as you should be, you will always make it past the ground attack in time, and really the only threat is the shoulder cannon. As I mentioned, Aurelianite, who is the gold Titan you find in the Golden Coast, shares the exact same attack patterns, so this keep close strategy can be applied to him as well. If you have more than one Titan to fight, however, the chances are that they are spread out enough that denying one's laser is not enough to get the others, and you'll have to resort to standing behind terrain and waiting out the laser attack like usual. However, I would still try this strat out because after the far away Titan finishes its laser, it should start walking over to you and the Titan you're running around, enabling you both now to be at a distance while they will never laser. But when it comes down to it, it's always better to be safe than sorry, so when fighting multiple, keep a distance and avoid the laser beam. For magma and overloading worms, there isn't really much to it. They have two phases, one where they will be flying around in the air and another where they'll be constantly coming in and out of the ground. This is where you will do the majority of your damage to the worms. When they're flying around at supersonic speeds, you should hold your big damage stuff like a Prayon shot until they are on the ground. Speaking of the Prayon, a quick tip is that if the worm is currently under the ground, the explosion radius of the Prayon is actually big enough to damage them despite the blast hitting the ground and not the worm. It will hit them through the terrain and deal just as much damage as if it was a direct hit. So keep that in mind if you're struggling to land Prayon hits on the worms because they move pretty fast. Overloading worms are basically the same fight as magma worms, but with the added threat of shooting down lightning occasionally. Luckily for us, the radius of the lightning explosion is quite small, so if we keep a larger distance than melee range, sorry mercenary mains, you'll be fine. It may look scary with the raining down of lightning, but it's not a big threat to you at all. The biggest tip with worm fights is to avoid their head. Them chomping on you is where the vast majority of their damage comes from, so do whatever you need to avoid their head making contact with you. Otherwise, worms are just annoying to fight, not really dangerous. The largest threats of the boss enemies are the Alloy Worship Unit, Clay Dune Strider, Imp Overlord, and Wandering Vagrant. Now, the world spawn boss of the Worship Unit isn't bad at all. No, I put these guys in the highest threat tier because of the Eggy Boy that you spawn on Siren's Call by destroying the 6 eggs nest. Yeah, that guy. I'd recommend to always skip that boss unless you are in the middle of a god run because he scales really fast. The teleporter boss on stage 4 will probably have like 15k HP, while the worship unit that spawns from the nest will easily have double that amount, not to mention its increase to damage. Avoid the secret boss at all costs. Otherwise, the regular worship units aren't too bad at all. They will occasionally spawn little sentries, which you should take care of right away, and be sure to avoid their rapid spray and parry attack. Once they hit 50% HP, they will also use a mega attack, which gives them a massive chunk of shields and places a couple launch pads below you. Once a few seconds pass, those launch pads will activate, dealing a butt ton of damage to you and launching you very, very high in the air. So, hey, you guessed it. Keep running in a circle and avoid the launch pad attack at all costs. Wow, never would have guessed that one. All right, with the Clay Dune Striders, we can go back to an actual strategy. Everybody knows their signature move, the Big Suck. Once they reach around 30% HP, it's somewhere between 20 and 30%, I don't know the exact numbers, they will go down on the ground and get a massive armor buff and start sucking in anything and everything around them while simultaneously healing. This is the Big Suck. The more things in the suck, the more they heal. So this is the entire fight, basically just dealing with the Big Suck. The best strategy I can give is to avoid this phase entirely. How do I do this, you ask? Okay, I'll tell you, but you have to subscribe to my YouTube channel because over 75% of you are not subbed. Like, come on boys, what are we doing? But no, really, aside from the Big Suck, the Dune Striders can either be standing regularly or standing high up in the air, pooping out some heat-seeking balls. This is what you want to see. Once the pooping phase starts, and this is totally a serious guide, please trust me, you need to heavily DPS the Dune Strider and hopefully kill it. If the Dune Strider is in the air, it will never go down to the Big Suck until it is back on the ground completely. This means if you can damage the Dune Strider to about 30% HP or so and wait for it to go airborne, you can bypass the Big Suck entirely if you manage to finish it off. So if you have a chunk of burst ready, save it for when the airborne phase happens and you will more than likely take care of the Dune Strider before even seeing its final form, the Big Suck. If you don't have burst or you don't finish it before the suck, don't worry, just get as far away as possible from it to break the tether and try to kill everything that it is currently sucking in. If there's nothing around for it to suck, it will just stop and go back to normal standing. So kill everything but the Dune Strider while it's sucking, especially because it gets more than a 60% damage reduction while in the Big Suck. Moving on to Imp Overlords. Dodge their bleeding spikes and don't stay in melee range. That's about all there is to it. But regardless of the simplicity of this encounter, Overlords are very dangerous because if you do get hit by a spike or their big melee pummel, you will take loads of damage. Each encounter with the Overlords play out a bit differently due to their teleportation mechanic. You can't really rely on just running in a circle because their sporadic movement will eventually be just in the right spot for you to have no room to dodge their next attack. Your best bet is to keep a distance as much as you can and always jump. You have a much greater chance of the bleed spikes flying over you or under you rather than hitting you if you're jumping. If you have to be close, know that the pummel attack will only deal damage to the front and sides of the Overlord, so if you stand behind them, you'll avoid its hits entirely. Last but not least, here we have the Wandering Vagrants. For a lot of people that I've seen make comments on my other videos or on my stream, Dune Striders and Vagrants are easily the biggest threats. Vagrants are dangerous on a couple fronts. They occasionally launch out a tracking ball that explodes on impact, they have the big explosion, and they also have a regular attack. The tracking ball explodes on impact or if manually detonated from your attacks. The explosion radius is honestly a little too big, so this becomes top priority ready. Keep a distance from the vagrant, and as soon as you see the little balls start to spawn, take it out. Otherwise, even if you are the one to shoot and destroy it, its damage will end up reaching you and taking out a large portion of your health. And of course, we have the signature move of the vagrant, which is its own explosion. Like the Dune Strider, they will only do this move when they reach around 30% HP or so keep track of their HP at all times. You do not want to be caught out in the open when the explosion goes off. Completely breaking line of sight with the vagrant, so hiding behind a wall or a corner is your safest bet. But there is a tip I can give in case you are too far from something easily recognizable as safe to be behind. The little prongs of the teleporter, despite being quite thin, are actually thick enough to block the vagrant's explosion entirely. That's right, just put the teleporter prongs between you and the vagrant and laugh as the massive blast doesn't even tickle your toes. Alright, here's the recap for the boss enemies. Beetle Queens at the bottom, then Grove Tenders, Stone Titans, add Magma or Overloading Worms, and finally, Worship Units, Dune Striders, Imp Overlords, and Vagrants are the most dangerous encounters. And that does it with a complete guide to all monsters in Risk of Rain 2. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I read them all, I promise. If you'd like to watch me play live, you can check out my stream over at twitch.tv/Woolie Gaming, and consider joining our Discord server for notifications on my content or just for a place to hang out and talk and play with others. Thank you for watching.